Not yet. Apple, don't mess with
Okay.
Apple.
We good, Tucker? Okay, thank you. We'll call the meeting to order. Would you do the roll, please, Chris?
Yes. Deanna Carlson.
Here.
Todd Lavieri.
Here.
Michael Chen. Chris Davis here. Victor Alvarez.
Here.
Maria Weingart.
Here.
Robert Hamill.
Here.
James Yao. Nicholas Petrakis.
Here.
Jan Schaefer. Absent. Steve Doka.
Here.
Alan Bedaines.
Here.
We're good?
Yeah, everybody's here.
Okay.
No alternates needed.
Okay, let's see. We have minutes to approve from our April 8th meeting. Can I have a motion to approve? Victor, we just
I
rehearsed this.
move that we approve the April 8th.
Very
minutes.
good. Do you have a second?
Second.
We have so little fun. I mean, you got all in favor of approving those amazing minutes? Opposed? So moved. Okay. Let's see. We have a Board of Ed, and we've got Dr. Lutzy online. He's joined us as well. Congratulations to you, by the way.
Thank you.
Exciting graduation.
Yes, it was a wonderful weekend. Syracuse, they know how to do graduations, that's for sure.
Oh, my goodness. That's great. So the conversation was around the self-insured plan versus using other alternatives, and wanted to get your thoughts, feedback, and where we are. I know we've got a lot of handouts here, so I don't know where you want to start.
Sure, I'll just very quickly say hello and then hand it over to the folks in front, if that's all right. I
Got it.
apologize for not being there in person. I had a few things I had to take care of here. And so thank you for the courtesy of letting me zoom in. I figured of the three of us, if one person couldn't make it, I was the right person not to be in the room. So, Joe and Sean are there with you. We talked a little bit before the meeting, thinking that we could give you a quick rundown of the current status, and then Joe can talk quickly about our performance and planning ahead. And then we've done some work to build in to look at some of our comparable districts, some of our surrounding districts. So unless you've spoken together already before the meeting and changed the plan, that's the plan. And thanks again for the courtesy of letting me zoom in. I'm grateful to be here.
Perfect.
Okay, so I'm going to take everyone through this is the chart, this one pager. It's a status of where we are in the current year. In the way the format of the chart, the first column is the 25 budget. Next one is our projected actual for full year 25, and all the way to the right, what the differences are. And if it's a positive number, it's better. If it's a negative number, it's worse. So overall, the Board of Ed, ISF, Internal Services Fund, we're projecting that our net expense will come in below budget by approximately $900,000, with a dependency on how claims come in for April, May, and June, which is, significant dependency. But so far, so good. On the revenue side, which is up top, you'll see that we're coming in slightly below budget in employee contributions by about $48,000. On the expense side, we're coming in better to the tune of $986,000, and multiple reasons. The stop loss premium is expected to be $546 below budget as a result of bidding out our stop loss policy and moving from Voya to Sun Life back last June. Also, stop loss recoveries, which we do not budget for. Currently, we've received $216,000, and we do expect more in the next 3 months. Pharmacy rebates, we budgeted 600, and currently we're 156 better than that already, and it's possible we may see a few more dollars trickle in. Again, this all assumes that our claims come close to budget with the remaining 3 months to go. As a result, we expect to be able to provide for 40% of our corridor with a little bit left over.
One question. When do you get the IBNR forecast from the actuary?
We typically do that in September-ish. We'll do that projection.
And do you remember what it was year over year last year?
I don't have that with me.
I can get that for you.
I'm just asking because you have a 0 for IBNR here. And it's an assumption that there will be no change. And could be a change. Yes, Ann.
If I could just go ahead, it did jump up last year. That we have on the balance sheet, so with the way their claims are going, it looks like it may stay the same right now.
That's why the 0. Okay.
That's what I
It's the change. The 0 represents no change.
Yeah, I just learned in my professional history that this is always a wild card. It's a wild card.
Yeah.
Well, that never goes down.
We do it as a projection. So we, for New Canaan in particular, we'll run that model once we have the full fiscal year completed. And so we run different model assumptions based on historic lag, historic IBNR, and then we provide kind of a range. And then we'll kind of compare that to historicals to figure out what to book. It's really a function of where current claims come in, because a lot of it's going to rely historically, like we'll look at the historic averages. So we do have cases where it will come down, IBNR, if claims are performing better.
Okay.
Okay, you want to take it from there?
Okay, so I know we gave you a lot of information. Happy to go through all of it. Don't know if there's anything particular you want us to focus on. Typically, when I come see you guys, I usually walk through our claims to date, which will kind of mirror a little bit, but in more detail from what Sean just presented. And then I usually walk through the current budget projection for the Board of Ed. And then we were asked to do some comparisons to a neighboring district. And so we were able to get some of that data to talk through that as well. That was kind of my plan today. Is that good? Great. Okay, so if we could focus on the multicolored document stapled together. First, so page 1, just to refresh everybody's memory, we are the New Canaan Board of Ed is a self-funded plan. What that means is we're fully liable for all claims that get incurred by the plan. We use Cigna as our administrator, but Cigna holds no liability for claim activity. We do have stop loss. We purchase a third-party stop loss along with the town, so we work with the town on our stop loss product. In that case, there is some liability that they hold. So Sun Life was newly selected for this current fiscal year. Prior to that, we're at Voya. But so Sun Life is our stop loss carrier, and we'll talk a little bit about that on some of the other pages. The first page, what we're looking at here is net paid claims. And what that refers to is these are the claims that New Canaan is liable for. So this only counts claims up to the stop loss attachment point, which is $300,000. On the next page, I'll show you gross and then back out the left. So you'll see what it is. But here we're just kind of tracking the net claims. The reason for the color coding on this exhibit is New Canaan's, the Board of Ed's plan year runs consistent with the school year, September through August. But your fiscal year, as you all know, is still July to June. So we kind of created this color coding to kind of show you the actual fiscal years. So the top box, I track the plan year because that's how I do the renewal projections, is based on the plan year, the September year. But I know what's important for you guys to track is fiscal year. So the bottom box where you see the color coding, it tracks the fiscal year.
You know, you should, because there's a few new Board of Finance people here, probably explain why we changed to that method.
Yeah, so historically, I believe you were a July group
You were.
until probably about 2013.
On the board. I don't remember what year, but yeah.
It wasn't too long before I came over. And I think the primary reason, there's a couple reasons why districts will do that. One is if your union contracts follow the school year, sometimes it's cleaner to have your budget year follow the union contract, because premium contributions that are part of the union collective bargaining agreement will tie to the premium rates when they renew. Another reason is when you move towards the HSA plan, we were able to line up the deductible year with the union contract. And I think that was probably the bigger driver of the two. Yeah, it makes it difficult, and not terribly difficult, but it makes it a little confusing when you're tracking fiscal year. But for the most part, it's worked well for the district as far as kind of tying up for the employees. What we do is we track back to the 1920 plan year. We'll all know that 1920 is going to be, I think, 1920 is going to be a lower year for claim activity due to COVID-19 and stay-at-home protocols. For those of you who've been on this board, you've heard me talk about that a lot. For many groups, that carried over into 2021 as well. You guys kind of saw a pretty big increase. I hate to call it a return to normal because I don't think that's really what it was. But you guys, your claims increased more in 2021 than other groups did, and a lot of that has to do with large claimants, which we'll spend some time talking about on the next page. So I'm not going to go through every single column here, but we track the claims for the month. By month, and again, these are net paid claims. I only have claims through March. April's probably sitting in my inbox at home right now, at the office right now, one and the same sometimes. I have through March. One thing I'll point out is when we talk about the renewal projection, which we'll get to, this page kind of helps us have a general idea of what we think is going to happen with our renewals. So when we run renewals, and I'll talk a little bit more about this, when we run renewals, we're always looking at the most recent 12 months of claims. And so when Brian and Sean asked me to update projections, so when I update with March, what happens is I get to drop March of the prior year and run 12 months. So when you look at this page, and it's not always exact because there's lots of different moving pieces, but when you look at this page, if you look at the very last month of the column that showed, so you can see here was a big month, 1,896,000. And you compare that to the prior month, what that's telling you is I'm dropping 1.6 million, but I'm adding 1.9 million. And likely my projection is going to not improve. This is kind of where this sheet's helpful this time of year as we're kind of tracking claims. We get a quick idea of, hey, by updating with the new month, is that going to help or hurt the projection? The projection we're going to walk through is only through October. But we've looked at it every single month since October, and there hasn't been any rationale to update the projection from a claim perspective. Fees will change, and we'll talk more about that. So you can see I just average the claims at the bottom, your average, or total the claims, then average them. You can see, 1920 year, we were below 1 million. And if you go all the way to this year, maybe even look at last year, 23, 24, we were averaging about 1.3 million. So we have seen some increases below, and then we track on a fiscal year as well. The next lines below the fiscal year boxes, just two kind of important numbers to look at. And we'll talk about, I usually refer to contracts. We're going to talk a little bit more about members today than we normally do when we get to the neighboring town comparison. We track contracts and members. A contract is the employee, right? It's the subscriber, the enrollee on the plan. It's what the insurance companies will refer to as doorknobs, right? It's the households. Member is that employee or that subscriber and all of their dependents. And the insurance industry would call those belly buttons. So you got doorknobs as contracts and belly buttons as members. Another way to think of that is I'm a family of 4. I'm one contract, but I'm 4 members. Okay. We tend to track things on a contract basis because that's more real to you, right? If you look at this, if the Board of Ed looks at this and we don't have 1,481 employees, right? That number doesn't mean a lot to them, but they know that they have somewhere around 600, probably more, about 700, because this is only the people enrolled in the plan. So we tend to track things on a contract basis. So then below that, we'll create some per capita numbers for you to look at. So what you can see, if you go back to the very first column, we had a pretty big drop in those per capita numbers from the year you don't see, right? The column that's hidden. And then you see that jump. Remember I said we had a pretty big jump for 2021, bigger than most. If you talk to your neighboring communities or anybody in the state, they'll say, hey, we kind of saw low claims in 2021 as well. Some of that was driven by very large claimants, and we'll talk more about that. But then you can see 21, 22, we were at per contract rate growth of 6.8%. I would say when you look at this, if you're looking at growth, on average, we've been trending about 8%. So anything under 8 is better than trend. Anything over 8 is a little bit worse than trend. You can see 22, 23, we were higher than trend, dropped back below trend the following year. And year to date, which to Sean's point, we still have a lot of months to add, so it's not a mature column yet. But right now we're running, what I would say as well. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Any questions on that page? All right, so I like the next page better. So next page, it's on the back, by the way, so it's two-sided. On the next page, this is where we track where we expected the claims to be versus where they've actually coming in or where they've ended. So here I'm going to show you gross claims. The very first line is where we expect the claims to be. So you can see in 2019-20, we expected claims to be 13.6 million. If you flow all the way to the end, you see we're projecting claims to be 17.3 million for this year. And you'll probably remember that from the budget process last year. It was a big year. It was a big year. In that last column, you'll also see almost $1 million below the 17.297. That just takes that 17.3 million, divides by 12, and then multiplies it by the current months. It's a straight annualization or de-annualization. In theory, I should probably do some seasonality to that. People are hitting deductibles at different points, but we've done that. And to be honest with you, because the way large claims drive most of the costs in these plans, it doesn't really matter if I adjust it seasonality or not. So we tend not to do it. We tend to just kind of do a straight de-annualization. So if we can, I'll focus on maybe 23, 24, walk through that column, then I'm happy to address anything in the other columns. And then we talk about where we are 24, 25. So for 23, 24, we expected claims to be at 14.8 million. Gross claims came in at 16.565 million. That number below there is 705. That's the amount that was over the 300,000. So that was the amount that was excess claims. That was Voya's responsibility at the time. So our net claims was 15.859 million. We ended that year $975,000, almost $976,000 over expecteds, or about 6.56%. If you then track to the left, you can see the year before we were 2.68% over, 2.93% over, 0.72% over, and we were under in that COVID year by almost 21%. Just going to year to date, we're running about 5.39% under, or about 543,000. Based on that, I would expect we would end somewhere near expecteds as we kind of account. And again, I'm tracking the plan year here, so September through August, as we account for people starting to meet their deductible. I don't expect we're going to end at 5% under, probably working closer to somewhere near expecteds again for this year. Next line down below, we just talk about our stop loss premiums, and you can see that has jumped a lot. If you compare the last column, the first column to the last column, $700,000 in 1920, and we're up to more than double that at 14.779 million. Again, our stop loss level is 300,000. Yes.
Just a quick question. I
Yeah.
see that the Cigna expected claims is 17 million this year, right?
Yes.
But how come the individual stop loss premium is only 1.4, down from 1.8 the year before when the expected claims was actually higher?
Yeah, great. So good question. So probably the best way to look at that would be if you look at 22, 23, actually you can even look at 21, 22, right?
Yeah.
You see our 13.337 gross claims came in at the 16.4 million. Our excess claims were 2.627 million, and our stop loss premium was only $1 million.
Right.
So Voya took a pretty big hit that year, right? They only collected $1.1 million and
Yep.
paid out 2.6 million. So we got a pretty hefty increase, right? 1.1 to 1.7.
Yeah.
We had 1.2 million in losses, which isn't, they did okay. They'd probably like to do better, but we're happy with that. And what we did see is we knew there were large claimants in that activity that were no longer on the plan. So in our negotiations with Voya, we were able to show them that, and we were able to get a decent increase for 23, 24. And you can see our losses were fairly low in comparison to 22, 23 for 23, 24. And so again, we were able to negotiate and bring that down. I'll say that the partnership with the town has been very successful. I think we've done a very good job at managing stop loss pricing. It's been a really good process. It's been a great experience so far. And I think we've really driven, we're competitive. It's a nice size group, a nice size pool.
So you're saying because they made money in 23, 24, even though expected claims were projected to go up in 24,
They
25?
changed carriers.
Oh, change.
It's very soon, but when we look at,
There we go.
yeah, when we look at,
They
but,
don't
Got
know-
it.
they
but
don't
you
know
can
what
see
they-
even
they don't know
Voya,
what they're
right?
doing.
Now, thank you.
I was like, I'm gonna
That's
cut
easy
the
answer,
chase right there.
Okay.
So the large claim projection is really what's going to drive that stop loss rate. So if our increases in claims is all claimants below 50,000, right?
Right, then it
Non-large
does.
claimants, stop loss carriers don't care about that, right? They care about how much risk are they going to be taking on. And
Yeah, I see Sun Life, yeah.
so we did switch to Sun Life last year, and that helped a lot. But we're running well year to date. I mean, I think again, we had large claimants that were no longer on the plan that we were able to kind of negotiate that rate down.
Got it. Okay.
Do we feel good about that? I mean, I don't know what the stop loss claims will be. It's 264. You got 4 months left, I guess. Gonna be, I mean, our premium's
That is what it is.
$1,479.
Yeah, do we feel good about that? We were satisfied with the level of decrease that we got from 23, 24 to 24, 25. If we stay at performing well, this will give us more ammunition for
Lowering it next year.
yeah. So one of the things you'll talk about when we get to the renewal projection, the October projection had a stop loss rate that's around 15%. We were assuming early on. We've dropped that down to 5%. And again, knock wood, I think that number could be better. And we expect to get kind of real numbers in fairly shortly soon.
Information. New
Can I ask?
They,
Alan has
I'll
a-
go Bob
Just-
first and then
yeah.
you, Alan.
just curious about is there an informational disadvantage to a new carrier coming in? Do they, I mean,
Yes. Yeah.
so it's surprising that, well, and also they may not know what we're paying now, so it's truly a fresh start.
Two things kind of happen. The incumbent carrier, right, will usually be at a disadvantage because at some point they've lost money and they're trying to make this account look a little bit better, where a new carrier can come in and be more aggressive and have a little bit more room. So it's not uncommon that you see that kind of activity where in order to get a good rate, you got to move.
And with all the
plan.
HIPAA and stuff, I mean, they just see numbers. They don't know people, because if they could get really granular and know individual cases, like you said, we knew we were losing some high cost.
Yeah. So the incumbent carrier has that, right? Because they're processing those claims. So every claim that goes over, they know, hey, Joe went over, here was all their claims. They're going to look at that and say, hey, did Cigna do the right job managing the claim? Did they watch how many days they were in the hospital? Did they do all that work? So the incumbent carrier has that. So while you might, I don't want to say feel bad, but while you think that the incumbent has a disadvantage in these scenarios, they also have an advantage because they know more about those claims. So once we say, hey, these 5 claimants are no longer on anymore, they should be in a position to better price than a new carrier. Okay. What I will say is what's difficult for even us to get is Cigna is very tight-lipped on any level of detail on claimants. We can usually get some general information like what drug is this member on? Is there a treatment plan in place? But to give any kind of financial prognosis is very limited. So the stop loss carriers spend a lot of time looking at diagnosis. And then if there's high cost drugs, looking at what drugs those members are on.
I think Alan had a question. Go ahead, Alan.
No, you kind of answered it, but my understanding is a small number of claimants can generate a lot of claims, and it's often expensive prescription drugs. So you said that some of the high claimants have rolled off. Can you just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, typically when a high claimant's coming off, a good example of that could be a high cost newborn, right? We haven't had one here, but we have $1 million babies out there. So those typically would be a one-time hit, right? They were maybe premature. I mean, they might be more expensive than a regular infant or non-preemie infant, but they're not expected to be at $1 million every year, right? So that might be a claimant that it's going to stay on the plan, but we're not going to anticipate they're going to be a large claimant anymore. So we would talk to the carrier about that. Like, hey, this baby isn't expected to be a large claimant. Sometimes there's a surgical procedure that happened. You guys might remember we had a $3 million claimant. I think that was in the 2020-21 year. Where our stop loss is only $300,000. But that claimant was a very expensive surgery that took place. It was COVID related. There were other complications with it. But once that was done, they were no longer a large claimant. I mean, they're still a high claimant, but not a large claimant. So you can come off that way. People can leave the plan, retire, and leave the plan is another way they come off. Or unfortunately, sometimes they come off because they pass away.
Do you, a quick question, look, we have, the premium's gone up 80%, right? From 21, 22 to 23, 24, right? From $1 million to $1.8 million. The claims have dropped from 2.6 to 700,000. We switched over from Voya to Sun Life, fine. Our premium is 1.4. It doesn't look like we're gonna have 1.4. Don't know.
No.
I'm not gonna make it. So I guess the question for you would be, what is in the budget? What do we have this year? What is that premium?
In the current budget,
Stop
Or-
loss. Hopefully it's below 1.4. Yeah, for 25.6.
25.6, I think it was something similar.
so something
I think it was
similar.
like a 4% increase.
Do we, I'm sure we negotiate that then? I mean, that trend line would say that's a good deal for them. Really good deal.
Like I said, we were at 15 initially. We dropped that to 5.
I know.
And that's just us doing that. So when we work the market, we'll be pushing for better than that.
Okay.
We do know, we get indications, we do have 2 new large claimants that have come on since this report. So I'm not sure at what total level they are, but we expect those to be high claimants. I don't think it's going to get us, Todd, to your point, to the 1.4. But we expect that the 264,000 will be much higher.
Sure.
Yeah.
When you switched to Sun Life, did the prescription rebate amount change?
No, that's based on Cigna. Yeah, so that's all driven by Cigna.
And the claims number is net of prescription rebate?
The claim number is not. We do that, and you'll see that when I go through the renewal projection. We'll do it on the fee side.
Okay.
So Alan was perfect kind of transition. So section 2 is my favorite section of this report. And what we talk about here is our catastrophic and non-catastrophic claimants, or high dollar. You'll see HDC, high dollar claimants. We define a high dollar claimant as anybody over 50,000 for medical and prescriptions. There's some pressure in the industry to bump that number up to 100. I think I want to keep it at 50. I think it's important to kind of keep that number where it is. Historically, it's easier to track that way. Cigna came out and did a presentation. I said, "Hey, good news! Your high dollar claimants went down." I'm like, "Yeah, well, you're tracking 100 now, comparing that to 50, so it really didn't go down." Anyway, so we track claimants over 50, and what we do here, you'll see. So I just bring down. So let's maybe use the 23-24 column since it's a complete year. We bring down the net pay claims, so the 15,859,000. And then of that 15,859,000, 6.8 of that was for high dollar claimants. So anybody over 50,000. The remaining 9 million was for non-high dollar claimants. Here we're going to talk about members again. On average, we had almost 1,500 members on the plan. 54 of them were high dollar claimants. So 43% of our costs was driven by 3.6% of our enrollment. So right to Alan's point. Now, I wish I would have brought it. I don't know. We do have a couple large drug claimants in there as well. I'm not sure of the 54, how much of that's driven by drug or medical, but that's not a number that's hard for us to get. We could always kind of follow up with that. The other thing I like is that bottom line right below the 3.61. We then track our non-high dollar claimants on a PMPM, per member per month basis. And so what you can see is that except for that 2021 year, our non-high dollar claimants have been rising at a rate much lower than trend.
So these claim numbers, are they the actual dollars out the door after all the adjustments are made?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. It's what in theory comes right out of the bank account. And now the reason I say in theory is it gets reported to me before it actually gets drawn from you usually. Well, depending on the timing. So we won't always match. But yeah, it's what actually gets paid out after any adjustments, and then if we back out stop loss after the stop loss.
Another question, which is back on the top part. If I add up the total, maybe I'm thinking of this wrong, but you can correct me if I am. If we add up the total of the excess stop loss So we've already paid the 300,000 that's on our account, and this is the excess that the insurance company is coming in for us.
Correct.
And I did it for just the 4 years that, are complete on this chart, and then matched them up against the premiums that were then charged to us the subsequent year. We're paying more premiums out than we're getting back in stop loss. So the question is, you might say, well, that's the profit to the insurance company. But why even have it? Why even have yourself insured when you end up paying more out in premiums than it would have cost you if you just paid the claim?
Yeah, that's a good question. A plan your size, I've never seen a plan your size not have stop loss. The state of Connecticut employee plan, for example, does not have stop loss, right? I think it's over $1 billion plan. So they don't have stop loss, right? They're going to just cover those claims on their own. I guess the example would be that year we had that $3 million claimant, right? That would have been, right. So I believe that was 2021 year, right? So our net paid claims.
Right, but the insurance company made up for that the following year and the year after that by jacking up the premiums enormously. So eventually, on average and over time, they came out ahead. We paid more than the insurance company and they paid back to us. So kind of what's in it for us?
The thing is, we'd have huge
Yeah, I was gonna
volatility.
say
Right.
volatility, it's the
Right.
volatility. That's why you're doing it.
So you're literally can move the mill rate.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you guys have talked a lot in this town about reserves. And you,
Moved it from
Well,
150
Not
to
really, because
300.
the volatility occurs with a year or two lag when the insurance company makes it up in the premium, and that gets added in to our actual budget a year or two out.
Maybe year
the
in
year you have to
volatility hits you. If you have that big claim in that year, that's an unexpected
Right,
hit.
If we had to
Yeah,
take 300,
that's
if we
the
had to take
difference.
3 million out of our general
the difference.
fund to
That's the-
pay for, or out of the
Yeah.
insurance fund, I mean, that's a big draw
when we
to get fun, I mean,
Yeah.
talk, so.
Smooth it out.
yeah.
And what I'll say is, we do a good job at doing market checks every year. So while there might not be a full RFP on the stop loss every year, there are market checks. Say, what's this look like? Hey, Voya, how would you look this year if you had our claims, right? So we are testing the market. But what stop loss is really intended for, and it doesn't work this way anymore, but what the stop loss carriers will tell you is stop loss is really for unknown risk, right? So what they're going to, how a stop loss carrier is roughly going to estimate their pricing is, what do we know for known risk? We got to have premium to cover at least that much risk, and then make whatever profit we need to make. And then what do we expect in unknown risk? And they're going to use demographic factors. They're going to use actuarial tables to try to determine that. And that's our big argument with them, right? Is how much unknown risk are you assuming in that number, right? I think as underwriters, we can all sit around and say, okay, we get how the rate is going to at least be X for these known large claimants, but what are you really assuming for unknown risk? And then I think another thing is, because it's such a small population that's going over, it's not a real credible group. So what I mean by that, right, is if we have, like right now, if you look at the third section, right, we just bucket the large claimants. So our stop loss is easy, right? Our stop loss is 300,000. So you can just go to the last row. I mean, we had 3 claimants over in 1920, 3 over in 2021, 5 over in 21, 22, right? So it doesn't take 2 people, right? We're increasing by more than 50%. In stop loss risk. So that's their argument, right? If, some groups have $150,000 stop loss, right? So you have a bigger population that you can kind of manage risk on. So
To be fair, Chris raises a reasonable point. You could budget $1.5 million
You could
these last 5 years,
self-reserve, yeah.
self-reserve, and you would have been ahead every year but one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's the
And the
volatility
one-
isn't 3 million.
and
It's
the
the difference
one- the
between your
1 year,
highest number
right.
and $1.5 million.
And the 1 year over 1.5 was the 2.6 number. So
Yeah.
you would have to take 1.1 million your worst year
That's right.
out of the general fund.
But-
That's the worst year, but the other years you would make money and put it into the general fund.
And the last year would have made $1 million.
Right. So
Exactly.
the question is, can the town handle volatility
That's the
up
question.
to
That's the question.
$1 million or more?
If I can just, because we've had some preliminary conversation about just this, and I think it is a point worth exploring. The question I think is, there's the volatility question, but really I think the real question is, could we have a reserve that is healthy enough to absorb that if it were to come?
That's the question,
Right, so we've run our reserve right at the number on the aggregate stop loss, whatever, but if we had that in the ISF that carried and we could, whatever that budget, we decide what that number is it 1.5, is it whatever, and we use that for high dollar claimants and sort of serve as our own insurer that way and keep that level funded and keep an eye on things.
And we could, I don't know, that's something to think
Because,
about.
well, and I think one of the other pieces to it, for what it's worth, is because it's a static number, we've been at 300,000, but we know all the claims, they go up, right? Annually, claims are higher, higher, higher. So the cost gets more and more because that 300 threshold is lower and lower. Whereas if we were to self-reserve, again, we could have a strategy around that the Board of Ed and Board of Finance and everyone agrees to, and just keep that as a separate line instead of a line that we pay for an insurer.
I think
Oh, sorry, Brian.
2 million.
the excess point of 300, as Dr. Lutzy just said, maybe that's worth revisiting. Should it be 400,000? What would be the impact on reduced premium, for example?
Though I don't want to speculate on that, but we would see a reduction, and we've got some modeling that we can run to show, hey, based on known large claim. The way we look at the stop loss modeling is we look at it as a total cost of large claimants. So as opposed to looking at what's my stop loss level and the premium, it's what are the costs of all my large claimants? Pick a number, anybody over 100,000, anybody over 150,000, right? What's my liability at 300,000 plus the premium? What's my liability at 500,000 plus the premium? I think New Canaan's probably in a slightly different spot than most, probably the many clients in Connecticut, where I think stop loss is probably dropping stop loss is probably a non-starter for many communities. Maybe here it's not. You might not like this answer because I know you guys have spent a lot of time talking about reserves, but my reserve projections would get much higher if you weren't going to have stop loss. And so we would, that is a factor of the reserving.
Yeah, but we
modeling.
could,
But
over a few years, build $6-7 million of reserves.
you could.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, you
And
could
just
have
call it out as a line separately.
accident,
you
you
could
could,
have-
I mean,
you
you
could have
could,
catastrophe.
the sky is the limit without any.
Yeah,
I-
somebody could
I
drop
wouldn't-
an atomic bomb on us.
It would be irresponsible. Somebody, I don't want to think about what could
Insurance
happen.
exists for a reason.
That's right.
Well, I guess the part that we don't talk about often because it's not a large number, it's built in otherwise, is we do have an aggregate stop loss as well at 120%.
Yes.
So, and there may be, I don't know, Joe, if this exists, but maybe instead of a 300, do you go to $1 million individual stop loss or something like that, and then work with underneath that? I don't know if that's overcomplicating things. Worth a future conversation.
We could drop it all. I think at one point, Brian, we got an ag only quote. It was really high. But you can do an ag only. So we could drop individual altogether and go with an ag only. There's some issues there. Most aggregate stop loss policies like to have $1 million cap. We have to really fight hard in New Canaan
We
to
did, I
get
remember
that
this.
lifted.
Yeah.
And we've been successful in doing that with all the carrier changes that we've made. But if we weren't New Canaan and we weren't as successful, you would have $1 million cap on your ag. So an ag only wouldn't necessarily work well with $1 million cap. I would love to have conversations about different ways to be creative. I think we've talked a little bit to Todd in the past about, there's ways to use your reserve more strategically. And I think that you would take into consideration what your stop loss levels are. And so one example of that is, let's just say we went to 500,000 and I'm just making it up, right? Went to 500,000. We could still only hold the plan liable for 300,000, right? And then basically anytime somebody goes over 300,000, the reserve absorbs that layer, right? Between 300 and 500. So I'm still acting like it's a $300,000 stop loss. And that would bring our premium down. It wouldn't adversely impact the board's claim projection, right? Because I'm not going to be projecting higher claims going forward. There's stop loss products now out there. There's something called an ag specific that might work well in this case. And I think this might really play well here. What an ag specific does is we say, okay, we want 300,000 or 500,000, whatever the number is going to be, but we also agree to accept the next $500,000 in liability. So in other words, the first $500,000 that goes over 300,000, we're still liable for. right? So we know we've got the protection if it's a really, really bad year, right? But we're kind of self-funding. We're kind of creating the self-funded layer of stop loss. I've played with that at one group this year. It didn't work out well. Like the carrier was a little finicky. Usually what we would expect to see is your stop loss premiums would go down by the layer, right? We didn't see that in this particular case, but yeah.
How does the aggregate stop loss cap work?
So and that's another thing we have to fight with them over. But what it's intended to do is protect the entire plan. So individuals at the individual level, any one member that goes over 300,000, we have that protection. Aggregate applies to our claim projection. So if I say, hey, claims are going to be $10 million and we have a 120% aggregate, that means we're no longer liable at 20% above that. So we're only liable up to 120 to the 12 million. One of the things that we have to do, in addition to fight to get rid of the $1 million cap, is to fight to make sure that they're using our claim projection. Right? You know, I could say, hey, I think it's 10 million. They might say it's 15 million.
So in the case of that year that we keep on going back to, we had a $3 million claim. How did that work with the cap?
Probably didn't get to the 20%.
We didn't get that. We didn't get to the cap.
Even with that, which is the highest
and-
claimant we've ever had, we still didn't hit the cap.
Yeah.
Because it was one very high claimant, so it still only cost us $300,000.
Yeah. Oh, so good. Thanks, Brian. So it only costs you 300, right? So because they're already the aggregate is based on net claims, not on gross claims.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, in that particular year,
2 million was the
but the
highest.
insurance company made it up the next two by raising they got their money back.
That's right. We have, right, is and we've been a little bit better at that. We'll talk about that when we talk about John's budget compared to mine, right? Right, column 1 versus column 2 on Sean's sheet. We can't lock stop loss in until 3 months prior to September. So we're using, estimates, and you can see, so, our good news here that, hey, we might be almost $1 million under expected this year. Well, more than half of that is because our stop loss came in $500,000 lower. So some of that could be minimized too, right? If we didn't have stop loss, or we had a higher level of stop loss, or it wasn't such a big component of the total cost.
To show more buckets, 300,000, 400,000, 500,000.
Oh yeah.
So if we have that, historically, we can tell, okay, there was 1, there was 2 at 400,000. And the next time we talk about renewal, do a sensitivity analysis to show deductible at 400,000, what's the cost to us, 500,000, and so on. And then we can, and the committee, whatever, can make a decision.
Yeah.
What
What I would show if this would work is just, we'll pick a number. I'd probably pick, maybe 150, half of the attachment point. And we'll say, call that your total cost of large claims. And we can say, okay, here's everybody who went over 150. So you would see all of them, 150, 155, 156, all the way to whatever, 500, 300, whatever the number is, right? And then we could probably get some premium assumptions to make. Wouldn't be real until we got a real quote for it, but said, okay, if we're at 300, what's our total cost of large claims? If we're at 400, 500, what's our total cost of large claims? And then you would see the actual claimants.
Martin.
Yeah.
That's great discussion. And I think that that's a great idea. We should probably see those kinds of options.
Next page, which is really just kind of somewhat of a mirror of the previous page. What I do here is just track now where we were to date based on March claims, right, for all those years. Because the prior page, right, I'm comparing March claims to a full fiscal year. So all this does is make that same comparison, but to the same point in the year. So I don't know if we need to go through that in detail or not.
Or higher overall claims, but lower overall excess claims over stop loss.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
And fewer members over,
right,
versus last year. Sorry, fewer claimants over 50, not over stop loss.
And where does the employee contribution come in here? Does that go into a pool too to pay for claims?
First sheet. I'm tracking total cost of the plan. So I'm not concerned about employee contributions.
That's not- yeah.
So that comes off on the budget part.
So, yeah, so when we're adding the resources that we have a line for employee contributions plus what the town funds. And that gives us our total revenue number.
Exactly.
I see, okay, fine.
Yeah.
Those are the big
Yeah.
tickets, yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Do we have time to talk about 25, 26?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so the next page will show you our claim modeling that we do. The first column is broken up into several boxes. I'll talk about those. The first column is the current base year. And then the second column is the projected year. As I said, we've updated this every month. We might not have done it in December, almost every month, to kind of compare to October. And there hasn't been a significant enough change to change versus what they first budgeted, right? To the extent that nothing's changing significantly, we don't want to have to change the budget, right? But if claims came down significantly or maybe went up significantly, then Brian and Sean would come to you guys and talk about why that would impact the budget. But if it's not going to change significantly, we don't usually change these numbers. But no, we are looking at them every month. So the first box is what we call our experience period box. And what I do there, these are the, as I said earlier, we're always looking at the most recent 12 months of claims. And we're going to use that as the basis for our projection going forward. So every month that I add, right, it would go October, November, I would still only use 12 months. I'm only using 12 months. Some of you may have heard, 10, 15 years ago, we would do 2 years worth of data when we were doing projections. If you're a much smaller group, we might do 2 years worth of data. The claims are so big now. And what we're really finding is the most recent 12 months is the best indicator of claims going forward. So there aren't many carriers out there anymore doing 2-year claim projections. 2 years of experience for a claim projection. And we'll talk a little bit about trend. When you talk about trend, if you do a 2-year period, you're going to actually have a higher trend. Right? So I'm going to make claims look 2 years older than they really are. So I'll explain that a little bit more when we get to the third box. But so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to bring in our actual gross claims. These won't tie back to any of the other pages, right? Because this is running through a different time period. Even if you went to try to add them all up, it wouldn't, because those are net claims you're looking at, right, on the first page for that same 12-month period. So I'm looking at a new 12-month period every time. So you'll never really be able to get to exactly this number. But you can see that between January 24, for 24-25, we use claims through January. For 25-26, we're using claims through October. Our gross claims weren't up very much, right? They're up 0.74%. That next line down is a normalization adjustment. Basically, that was our COVID adjustment. So in that year where we knew, right, 1920, when we were doing the 2021 projection, we knew we had April through June claims were low months. And so what we did is we normalized those, right? We said, in a normal year, how would our year have completed, right? If we had a normal year, how would that have completed? And so we made an adjustment factor. I think it was probably for you guys around 5%, might have been a little bit, give or take a little bit there. So basically we'd bump that up. I don't really need to keep it there anymore. It's 1, right? So multiplying by 1, it's not going to change anything. I keep it there because I still get questions about it. And people still ask me, are we doing any adjustments for COVID? Are we thinking, I probably can stop this year. I think this year I haven't had any questions about it, but that's what that number does, right? So all we're going to do is multiply that number by 1. So we get the same number as the first line. And then you'll see a negative number here. So what I'm doing is I'm taking out all my large claims, right? Because I'm trying to get to a net pay claim projection.
Large claims again is out.
In this case, I'm talking large claimants as anybody who either is over stop loss or I project would be over stop loss.
Okay, greater than stop loss.
Over the 300. And what I do is I remove all of those claimants, right? So if Joe is a $575,000 claimant, I'm taking out all of my claims, all 575,000, right? You might say, well, Joe, you're going to be at 300. Why aren't you just taking out 275? What I'm going to do is I'm going to add myself back in at the bottom at 300. And what that does is that keeps me from trending that 300,000. Because if I trend 300,000, what's going to happen? It's going to be greater than 300,000, right? So I'm trending claims forward that I wouldn't need to. There's another reason why we do it, and we'll talk about that when we get down to that box. So I back out those claims. I get a paid claims less large claims. You notice I don't call that net claims. It's not really net claims, right? Because I removed all those claimants. If I had a benefit adjustment, if we were going to, and we aren't, so if there's any teachers listening, if we were going to double the deductible, go to a $5,000, $10,000 deductible, or if we did in the experience period at some point, we would adjust those claims down, right? We'd say, well, now for half of the year, our deductible is higher than the first half of the year. I should adjust those down because it's going to stay higher, right? There's no benefit adjustment, so that stays at 1. Then I get my adjusted claims. And then you see I bring in experience period contracts. So we talked about contracts, right? That's my doorknobs. And no, it's not, you don't have 7,500 contracts. What I do is I count everybody once for every month that they're active on the plan, right? So I'm taking, you could divide that by 12 and get the average. But that way I'm comparing the 12 months of claims to the 12 months of enrollment on a 1-for-1 basis. And then I get a per capita. And so you can see that even though my gross claims were only up 0.74%, my starting point is 4.64% higher because I removed less large claims in total dollars. Okay. Had a slight change in enrollment too, which make that go a little bit higher, right? Fewer, dividing a bigger number across fewer bodies. So the next box down is just kind of informational. So similar, I like tracking large claimants. So I'm just showing you that our members over 50,000, we had 7.6 million through January in the first column. That dropped to 7.2 on 2 additional members over 50,000. And then here you'll see the next line down, which is the negatives in the box above, sorry, 782 million for 24-25. That's the amount of claims that I'm bringing out. So what I actually do is anybody who is close to that 300,000, we just detrend it. So we say, okay, trend, what is 300,000 with an 8% trend? Let's use that as an example. It's really only 275,000. So anybody over 275,000, well, I'm going to back out in that case. Then I just show your actual excess, right? So of the 2.3 million in claims that I'm backing out, 592 of that was actually over stop loss. Again, it's just informational. It's not going to factor into the calculation. And then the add back. So that 2.349 that I'm backing out was on 6 members. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add them back in, but only at the 300,000. So I got to add back 1.8 million. Third box is kind of where all the magic happens. The first line you'll see there in the first column is 19, and then you'll see 22. So that's the number of trend months that I'm projecting forward. So if I'm doing a renewal right now, right, through October, I'm not trying to make those October claims look like October 25. I'm trying to make them look like August 25, right? So I can't just trend out for a year. I have to trend out for almost 2 years, right? 22 months. So that's a really important number. Basically, for every month that we add, and you can kind of see it here, right? I use claims for January in the first column. I have a lower trend month number, right? So for every month that I add, I've got 1 less month of trend that I have to account for. And you'll see in the next line how that kind of works out. So in the second column, right, we're using an 8.28% annual trend. It's medical, drug, and dental combined. On a 22-month basis, that's almost 16%, 15.7. So last year, right, we were about 8.6% trend, and it was only a 14% effective trend, applied trend, right? Because I was trending out lower months. So I said earlier that we had that really high month in March, so we knew it probably wouldn't hurt the it wouldn't help the projection. Sometimes we can have a higher month and it can still help the projection because now we have 1 less month of trend in our projection model. So this is an actuary in the room. He might know this example. We kind of call this the hurricane model, right? So when I'm 22 months out, right, I'm trying to predict the hurricane cone. As I get closer, right, I can focus that in, just like the hurricane model, right? As that hurricane gets closer, we know, is it going to hit the Cape or is it going to hit Connecticut? As we get closer, we can bring that number in better. So, so that what that tells you, right, is as we're adding months, if we're not seeing improvement, so claims are going up at least as much as trend. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And then lastly, just to do, if you ever want to do the math in your head, if annual trend was 12%, it's not, but if it was, you could say that's 1% a month, right? Then on a 22-month basis, that applied trend would be 22. Okay. Or you could take 8.28, divide it by 12 and multiply it by 22. It won't be exactly that number, but it'd be close enough. So if you ever want to do that at a cocktail party, you can show somebody. So then we just take our per capita, we trend that forward. If we want to add margin in, we could add margin in. We don't add margin in, so that's one. I can't think of the last time we added margin in. Probably when the Affordable Care Act first passed and we had all the new preventive rules and we had children on plan until age 26. We were using about a 5.3% margin there. I think in that time frame, we didn't call it a margin, we called it Affordable Care Act adjustment. But we don't typically have margin. If Brian said, hey, we're building a new school and we got so many kids, we're going to hire 100 new teachers, I'd probably put a little bit of margin in or talk about with him putting a little bit of margin in, because we can't just assume the population is going to be the same. So, but we would show it, right? So it's a conversation that we could have. That's why we put it in here. We then bring in our current contracts. So it's what was actually enrolled in October, multiply our per capita by our current contracts. We get a new projected claim level. Again, that doesn't include all those people I backed out. So I've got to add 1.8 million in, and I get a claim projection of 18,190,000. So I said there were two reasons why I kind of like to do the large claimants this way, back them out and then add them back in. It's more visible in the first column. So you can see last year, you'll see a negative 300,000. So what happened was we knew one of the 7 people we were adding back in was no longer on the plan. So instead of adding that person back, we made a reduction of $300,000. We actually had a year here in New Canaan where we added 300,000 because we knew a large claimant we knew the amount, it just hadn't hit as a claim yet. And so rather than not reflect it, we actually added 300,000. So I like the way we do it this way because then we can kind of talk about what our risk assumptions are on those large claimants. And then we apply adjustments to get to Cigna's numbers if we need to, or other adjustments if they're applicable. We might do another benefit adjustment if we knew something was coming forward. So we get to 18,190,000. The next box, we're going to add in fees. So the big number there, you'll still see is at the 1,693,000. That's at the 15% increase. We've dropped that to 5. I think it's 140,000 lower, right, Sean?
Yeah.
So in the budget is already reflective of that $140,000 lower. We have some fees for TPA that we pay. That's in this number. Our admin fee that goes to Cigna, we're assuming about a 5% increase to that. I don't think it'll be that big. That'll come down a little bit. And then we back out the drug rebates. We use 600,000 this year. I know we're already tracking above that amount. Frankly, I'm gonna use a little bit conservative on that. Rebate dollars are not guaranteed. They're tied to mostly large high dollar drug claims. And we don't really know if year to year they'll be there. So we tend to kind of be a little conservative on that number. Drug rebates could stop at any point. The one thing I do say is that if drug rebates went away altogether, then likely what would happen is the total cost of drugs would come down as well, right? So the example I always use is, well, Joe, is $600,000 too much? What if we only get 500,000? Well, if the model is right, what that means is we probably use more generic drugs than we use brand name drugs. And I'd much rather have no rebates and a lot of generic drugs than high rebates and a lot of brand name drugs. It would be better for the plan. And then we just add up the total. So total projected cost would be $19,879,000. At the bottom, we do so $1 million, almost $1.1 million. And then again, that's a little high because 140,000 would come off of that number. And that's how we do the projection model.
So I got a quick question.
Yeah.
Thank you for the projection model. My projection just is probably a lot less sophisticated than what you just did, but just a quick question. I'm going back to the page before, right? On a year to date, right? Excess claims over stop loss. Let's just take a look at the last 2 years. Last year, 322,000 year to date. This year's 264,000 year to date. Last year, the 322,000 translated to a stop loss for the full year of 705,000, right? This year, if you just do the same trend line, if you're behind last year on excess claims over stop loss, which is good, let's just even assume it catches up and is 705,000 for the full year. and we paid a premium of 1.5 million this year, it means that the insurance company made another 800,000 on us this year. Why would we pay them more, 1,673 next year, if for the last 2-3 years they've made money on us?
Yeah, well,
So again, that 1.6 is lower already, right? Because we've dropped that to 5. But I'm also optimistic that that'll be lower than the 5.
Okay.
Yeah, it's an estimate at this point. Every month that we're not seeing that number grow drastically gives us better arguments to keep that number low.
Yeah.
And it's not impossible to get decreases. I've gotten decreases. Yeah, we've gotten decreases even without changing carriers. We've gotten decreases.
Right.
And this might be a good example of a year you could, right? A new year with a carrier where they haven't had any losses yet.
Right.
Right. It's harder to go to Voya and say, I know you lost $2 million at one point.
But if they make like 800,000 on us this year, then there's an argument, right?
There's a very good argument. Yeah. Yeah.
Is that the-
And we work with the town's consultant on that. He actually drives stop loss modeling, but we talk
190.
together a lot, and we're on the same page that we're not going to be
This is
necessarily
same as
happy
this
even with 5.
See, this one was
Got
in
it.
the
Okay,
prior year,
great.
1990.
And this is why we do this annually, right, Jim? We go out every year to price the stop loss.
Yes.
What we're looking at when we look at the 1.617 was the budget number, but we don't know where we're going to land at that point. So, but we do price it out every year, and it's always
When you price it out,
We so the town kind of start now because the town needs their number and they're a July group. So have you gotten your number? You just did. Okay. So is ours in it or no? Do you know? Okay. Sometimes we get them at around the same time. But so Larry, Epic Consultants, they're kind of pricing it as they like we do. So kind of in the beginning, I'm doing my own projections and just talking to him about it. As we start to get closer now, we'll start working together, and then he'll check market. What'll happen is if the numbers are looking good on the town side, then we would expect similar. If the town could be doing horribly, we could be doing well, or the other way around. So then it gets a little harder to manage that, right? It's like, well, we still want to try to stay together if we can, because it's been beneficial. But the town will get their number. That'll kind of be some indication on what our number might look like. Yeah.
Sean, what's our budget number? Is it the 18,190,000?
For claims, yeah.
526 for claims?
Yeah, that's in the budget, right? Because that aligns with the 17,297,000, which is in the prior pages as the budget for last year or for the current year. Right, 17,297, right?
Yeah.
So it's 18,190.
So I think thank you for that. As always, tremendous. I know we covered a lot of material there. One question I think we always have is, should we self-insure? And we get feedback all the time from people on whether we should or we shouldn't. Have we run, when's the last time we put this out to even bid?
2 years ago, we looked at we didn't do a full bid, but we did look at 2 years ago, fully insured. Brian, 2 years ago, right?
correct, Jeff. That's when we had the meeting over at South School in the cafeteria. Yep.
Yeah, it was 12 to 14% increase to go fully insured. Usually what I would say is 12 is kind of like the average. I think you were closer to 14 if I'm remembering right. One of the reasons why is if we were fully insured, Cigna or any carrier likely wouldn't. So when you're fully insured, there's still kind of a stop loss component to the rating, and they call it pooling, or they might call it experience protection. There's different ways that they'll refer to it as. It would probably be much lower, right? So they probably wouldn't have you at 300,000. They might have you at 175 or 200. And so the quote unquote premium portion of that would be higher. I mean, I think in general, what you find is that, and I would think in New Canaan especially, right? Because we've had so many conversations about reserves. Why would you pay a carrier to hold your reserves when you
talked about that.
seem to be doing
That's
a pretty
exactly
good job on your own, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if anything, you want to talk about absorbing more risk. So it was interesting. I don't want to jump too far ahead, but we did, as part of our next topic, we did kind of reach out to some other surrounding communities around here. And in Fairfield County, we were surprised. There's more fully insured groups than I would have expected. And I'm not sure why.
It's hard
maybe
when
they
you
should give
aren't,
me a
it's
call.
hard to get those reserves. I mean, in the way that we have budget to try and get those reserves built up. I mean, Brian, I mean, we said when we looked at going, even when I was on the board, when we looked at fully insured and we're like, if you leave, you will never go back. You will never go back because you have to build up those reserves.
Right. And that's, I think, exactly right. And what we see in part is a couple of the districts went over to the state plan and then pulled out. But they move out back, lose it going from self-insured to the state and then to move out of the state. And now they're fully insured because they don't.
Right, but if we're fully insured and the cost of being fully insured is less than the cost of self-insurance, then over a long time, you're ahead. So how does that compare? You've got your little thing here on the neighboring town. So let's talk about that.
The only way you would ever have a scenario where you've outperformed your total cost on a fully insured basis would be if you were changing carriers every single year, right? You'd have to be, you'd have to have a carrier willing to buy your business. And I used to joke about this all the time when I've always done self-funded. I used to work at Anthem, but most of my clients have always been self-funded. I had a couple of very small cases that were fully insured, but we'd always ask for fully insured quotes. And the carriers would give me these underwriting adjustment factors, 5%, 7%, and basically it was them buying the business, right? And so I used to joke that I'm going to convert all my clients to fully insured and just go out to bid every year because eventually I'll get to zero. I don't know, you guys will be better at math than me, but how long does it take 5% to get to zero, right? It'll be less than 20 years, 15 years, right? In 15 years, I'll be to zero premium because Everett just keeps reducing my claims, my cost by 5%. So that would be the only way, right? The only way an insurance carrier is going to want to take you on a fully insured basis is they're going to make, I'm not even saying their profit, right? They're going to make their design margins. But what they're really going to try to do is make margin on you, right? They don't want to lose money on you every year. And so if you're self-funded, right, that's the barest bones you can be, right? You're paying a lower admin fee. Stop loss would be the question, right? What's our stop loss level? What's that premium level? But we're only liable for our claims. Smaller groups may have a harder time, even beyond the reserve, may have a harder time being self-funded because it can be variable, right? Fully insured is typically going to be a little bit more predictable, especially within the year, right? If we had a $12 million premium plan, we pay $1 million a month. Doesn't matter if our claims are $8 million or they're $17 million. For that year, we're going to pay $1 million a month. If our claims go from 12 million to 18 million, Sean's got a lot more claim activity coming out of his bank account. So there are some groups that might say, I want to be fully insured. I don't want
on this chart that compares the neighboring town, in the first 3 years, the neighboring town came out ahead.
They came out.
Okay.
Yep.
So far, they look good. So why do we look better? I mean, why is our way of doing it better than what they did?
So my answer to that is probably none of us are doing anything better or worse than the other, right? I would assume we have similar plan designs. So part of the and by the way, we've kind of migrated now to the blue and white sheet. Part of the problem with this analysis is we were just relying on getting kind of high level data. Like, I don't know what their plan designs are. We don't know what the renewal history has been. I mean, we can see kind of in premiums. But what I would say is just like a self-funded plan, large claims are going to drive a lot of their costs. So what you'll see at the bottom of that sheet, I didn't have your neighboring towns information, but I had our information. So I do show, and I picked 100,000 here because I didn't know what their stop loss level what their pooling point might be. It's probably a little higher than that. But how many claims did we have over 100,000? And you can see that jumps right from the first column to the second column. And that's going to drive a lot of our cost is the number of large claimants. So are we doing anything better here in New Canaan versus your neighboring town to avoid claimants over 100,000? Probably not, right? I mean, you're talking the next town over, a town very close to you. It's not likely that our risk factors are that much different, right? Some of it's just luck, right? Were we lucky or unlucky to avoid or get a significant large claimant? And that's really what drives it. If we look at all of my clients, I can say with 100% certainty that what makes or breaks your year is the number of large claimants, right? The change in the number of large claimants. So if you go from 50 to 60, it's not going to be a great year, right? If you go from 60 to 50, it's going to be a really good year, right? If you have little change, then it becomes more predictable. But those large claims have become such a big component of your total cost, and those are the hardest to predict, right? We can assume who's there, and that's basically what the model does, right? The model assumes whoever's there is there, right? We don't say, oh, well, we think we'll get 10 more. We don't do that. So that's the risk that we're kind of managing. To the stop loss carriers' credit, what they're managing too is, okay, do we go from 54 to 64, right? In their point, do we go from 3 to 6, right? So that's kind of the big issue. If you were fully insured, the one thing is in that year you went from 3 to 6, you won, right? It costs you nothing, but they'll get it in the next year. And I'm not going to claw it back, but your projection is going to assume those claimants are going to recur, right? And they're going to go forward in that.
Yeah, but that happens, we were talking about this earlier in the conversation, that happens with our stop loss premium. You know, we go from 3 to 6 and the next year or 2 years later, you know, we get these big increases, everybody ends up.
Which stick.
Yeah. Then you ever go back. So if we can go from 3 to 6 claimants, the insurance company might give us a big break. Instead of giving us a 5% increase, they give us 4.5. But, you know, we're still getting.
So imagine that conversation, but on the whole plan now.
Yeah.
Right. So now we're isolating that conversation to just our large claimants and our stop loss premium, right? I didn't do the math. What's our stop loss as a percentage of total claims, right? So we're having that argument on a relatively small piece of your overall cost. I mean, a significant piece, right? But overall, a smaller piece of your total cost. If I'm fully insured, now I'm arguing the whole piece, right? All $19 million. I'm going to argue with them over now. Versus when I'm arguing with stop loss, it's very isolated, and especially here because it's 300,000, right? It's really isolated. If you're at 150, again, it's a longer, bigger pool now I'm looking at, which could help or hurt, right? Depends. It could help because there's more people, it's more credible. But
Yeah, it seems to me that that the debate here is if we're going to be self-funded, and there seems to be some good reasons to be self-funded, then we need to have a more efficient management of our reserves and how we use them, whether we use them to pay stop loss premiums or whether we hold them ourselves or some portion of them ourselves, and we manage
And evaluate the stop loss level.
it. Yeah,
We could maybe
Yeah.
bump that up to 4. We should see what the impact on that might be for premiums. We should know that.
The assumption of all this is that employee contributions are static. We don't change, increase, lower them.
they're tied to the
Contract.
tied to the contract. I don't know, Brian or Sean, if you remember.
They've gone up over time, but I don't know if they
We're-
stayed still, and I don't know.
It's
if the last-
50%, it's 50% of the deductible.
I think he's referring to premium, Brian. Is it
Oh,
20?
I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, that has gone up a bit. Each of them are a little bit north of 20%.
Yeah.
of the
And so
premium.
typically what we used to see is that was an automatic 1% a year during negotiation. So when we were down at 13, it went 13, 14, 15. Then it went
been up in
15,
the
16, 17.
20s for a
And then
while.
once you kind of got into the 20s, there were other economic factors going at play at that time when we kind of got, like, everybody's kind of around the same. Like if you ask me what's the average premium contribution for boards of ed, I'll tell you it's about 20%. It's probably a little higher now because people went up.
Yeah,
Let's say-
we're only a little bit higher than that. Maybe we're, we're 21, 22 at the high end. But being a percent, it'll move with the premium, so it helps.
Yeah, so even if it stayed flat, it's going to go up with the premium.
So, because I know the town side has got a much lower stop loss, they're at 150 and Board of Ed's at 300, and you bid together.
Yeah, so it makes it a little complicated, but
Okay, because that's what I was gonna also ask, like, because they're at separate levels, like, is there any advantage to tying the stop loss to the same level and I mean, it's just
probably the harder part is the two different cycles than
Oh,
it is the
'cause
levels.
Town and the Board of Ed are on different.
Yeah, I think that's probably harder than it is because it's just math, right? The example that we talked about, Nicholas, right, is if you've got all our large claimants, what's our liability versus what's our exposure for premium. That's not hard for them to do, right? Now they'll make some different assumptions because the town's smaller than the board. But I think the level, now the town, you know, one thing you could consider, right, is, and I've done zero analysis on the town's plan, but that could be a baby step right away, is do you just bump the town to 300 and take that and absorb that all through the reserve? Then you're at the same level. You know, and again, I'm saying that I have no idea what that would do. I'd have to see that model right in my head to see if that would make sense.
Yeah.
Do we need to go through the?
I think, well, I don't know, is it pretty self-explanatory? People have questions about that? About the town? This is the comparison, the one in the bar in the middle. I think we're good. Other questions for Joe, Alan? Anything?
Good analysis, thank you.
Brian, anything else you want to add?
No, just to say that the Board of Ed has had some preliminary discussion about the ideas we raised around stop loss tonight. So certainly we'll look for a time to maybe get a subcommittee of the Board of Finance together with the Board of Ed and continue that conversation. I think that when we have to continually look at our plan and find ways to improve, and this could be that next step.
I get, you answered one important question. We did put it out to bid 2 years ago.
Yeah.
You gotta remember that.
Yeah.
So, and it wasn't that exciting.
No.
And there's a good idea here on the town.
Yeah,
Okay.
you see the numbers in those per member per year and everything else, and you see how those fluctuate a little bit. But I think in the good years when you come out ahead, that's your advantage of being fully insured, self-insured.
And I'll say about bidding, right? Because you're self-funded, right? Our claims are our claims. It's really the fees that we be shopping. And so because we're always doing an RFP at any one point, kind of all my groups go, it's kind of like when we do the stop loss checks, right? Like, wow, Anthem's being really aggressive on fees. But again, I mean, so if Anthem cuts their fees in half, would you still want to change carriers, right? It doesn't change the overall. That's the one thing about having third-party stop loss. If you change stop loss carriers, your members don't even care. They don't realize it.
That's right.
You change from Anthem to from Cigna to Anthem, and there's disruption. Even though it might not be big, there's still disruption.
Checks everybody.
Yeah, and you're talking about the admin fee is a relatively small piece. So
Yeah, no, that one's not important.
I agree. That's right.
if we knew, if I found out tomorrow that Anthem's discount advantage was 20% higher than Cigna's, then we would be moving to Anthem, right? Well, we would be negotiating moving to Anthem, but that's not the case today.
Okay. Great. Sean, anything else? You good? Thank you very much. That was terrific. Great overview. Appreciate it.
Keep those there.
Justin, right on time.
Yeah.
8:01. It's 8:01. Little false advertising there. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
It's up front, but yeah. So,
Thank you, Brian.
Thanks.
okay, so we have as our another guest tonight, Justin Owen, who is with Russell Investments, who are our advisors and managers for the pension and OPEB and Marcelli funds. We had an excellent meeting earlier this afternoon, going over details on the allocation of various investment buckets that were recommended to us. We took some look at a couple of scenarios. As a board, we voted to make some changes and to have them apply to the pension fund and OPEB. But I'll let Justin go through kind of the highlights of the presentation and details on what we're actually going to be doing.
Well, just to add to that, the committee made a recommendation.
We
don't have to go through it now, but we have to vote on it when he's done with.
What Justin's going to present is the current state and the recommendation voted out of committee.
Right, perfect. That we'll vote on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds good. So in terms of looking at the overall portfolio, that's on page 55 of the presentation. A lot of the same themes that we talked about in the fall when I was here before. but this gives a good overview for where the portfolio is right now, which is the first column in column A. And we have a couple of key measures, the cumulative asset return and then the volatility. So measures for the reward and the risk of each of these portfolios. So currently the portfolio is basically a mapped portfolio from your previous provider, Vanguard, which was a passive implementation of a few different asset classes. We map those over to our funds with the intent of having a discussion and provide recommendations for a new portfolio. The portfolio that the RPAC narrowed in on was portfolio D, which is 4 columns over. Again, this is on page 55. And the main changes, first of all, the overall biggest driver on long-term outcomes is going to be the split between your return-seeking or growth portfolio and the fixed income assets. That's currently at 65% and 35%. And I'm comfortable with that overall split for a retirement plan that is still open to new benefits, well-funded. I think it's a reasonable place to be. And the RPAC agreed with that, the 65-35. So the overall split is not changing. What is changing is what's going into each of those underlying components. Another key decision is how much of the portfolio will be in passive implementation, just mapping to indexes, versus active implementation. As a firm, we think that there are certain asset classes that are very challenging for managers to get consistent excess return in, and we'd recommend that they stay passively managed, including US large cap. History has demonstrated that it's been very challenging to gain excess return consistently over time. So US large cap and also non-US developed markets, we're recommending continue to be a passive implementation. Other areas of the market, including US small cap, emerging markets, and also some other highly liquid asset classes, listed real estate or REITs and listed infrastructure. Our sub-advisors, the managers that we've used, have demonstrated that there's good excess return potential in those asset classes, and also our core fixed income benchmark to the Bloomberg aggregate index. So the main changes with between A and D is that we are moving from passive to active implementation in those areas that I just described, and also adjusting the overall asset allocation to have some into what we call a global equity mandate, which is where we allow a portfolio manager to look at the global market and make allocation decisions, US versus non-US, different market cap sizes depending on what they're seeing in the market. That would only represent about a quarter of your overall public equity allocation, but we recommend that across the board with our clients and have seen good value add in that area. So overall, splitting out the public equity exposure into 4% into public real estate, 4% into the listed infrastructure, and then spreading the remainder of those assets across the different regions as shown in column D. These are all still daily liquid. There's no concerns in terms of liquidity. And there are other asset classes that are available that can be discussions at a future time, but we think that this portfolio is a great next step and an improvement overall in the portfolio from where you are right now.
And what's the change in fees from portfolio A to D?
That I should have had on hand, but I don't have it on me right now. I'll need to ask Rich, and we can follow up with that. But given that the majority of them are still passively implemented, it's not going to be significant change. But I will check on that.
What percentage active is it? I'm just adding up the 4. Is it 22% is actively managed? Is that correct?
So it would be everything except for the 30% in US large cap and the 10% in the non-US developed market equities. So the,
25%, right?
25%.
let me see.
Of the equity
Of
piece.
the equity.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And the fixed income is also,
Yeah, the fixed income would be actively managed. Yeah.
okay.
Any feedback from the committee on the changes? Obviously, you support the
Yeah,
new,
we
the
do
new,
support, there's an increase in their expected returns. About 60 basis points, 62 basis points. There's also, because we are going into some new areas, there is an increase in volatility of 0.43, but we think that the trade-off is justified.
Adjusted return.
Just quick question. Looking at B, you're going about 60 points as well, but your volatility goes down. Why wouldn't we consider B where you have lower volatility and higher return?
Yeah, and that portfolio, it's shifting to a 60-40 mix. The 729, I'm going to need to follow up. That one does seem like that. I think that 7.29 is a typo because it shouldn't go up by that much.
Because that looks
Yeah, no, it does
great.
look attractive the way that
High
numbers
return,
look,
lower
but-
volatility.
But my
That's
experience
simple
tells
math
me
for me.
I typed that in wrong, but
That's
no,
what I
it,
saw, but I don't think that one works.
yeah,
Okay.
I would expect the
Yeah,
overall.
we also
return.
didn't want to move that far away from US, US large cap as kind of a core weighting. I mean, we're making a move in the direction away from the US, which probably is sensible, but we didn't want to take the big plunge from 40% down to 22% passive and reshuffle the 65-35 is a little more aggressive, but we're well funded. And we feel like we can, we'd like the long-term outperformance. We're not in love with fixed income, given the global sovereign debt situation.
Melissa, could you talk a little bit about the numbers that are presented here from their time from their snapshot in time to what is happening as of this morning and where we stand? There's been some changes.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. In terms of the overall market, I mean, just broadly about the market in the first quarter. Yeah, kind of it's been an interesting quarter, let's say. A lot of emergency meetings internally, a lot of war rooms talking about what's going on just in terms of like, what do we do with all of the volatility? Because it has been significant. Overall, the first quarter, US equity was down. Just about every other asset class was flat or positive. But since that time, the public equities in particular have been all over the map. Like we've had days where markets are up 2 or 3%, then a couple of days later they're back down 2 or 3%. Bottom line, as of today, U.S. equities are flat for the year. So we have fully recovered any losses since December 31st for U.S. equities, and non-U.S. equities have done quite well. In fact, if we go to page, let's go to page 6 in the deck, and this goes over some of it. As of the end of the first quarter, U.S. equities was down 5%, but the last couple days in particular, having heard that things are with the trade negotiations with China, there's been some really positive news that the markets reacted well to. That has had a couple of impacts. First of all, the public equity markets loved it. And it's what led today to U.S. equity markets being flat, but it also led to the probability of recession going down quite a bit, like across the board. For our company, we're showing here, as of the time we put this together, the bear scenario or probability of recession was 50%, but now that's down to 35%. And we're seeing that across the industry as well, as a lot of people are lowering that prediction of a recession. The underlying numbers were already strong. It was just so much uncertainty around the tariff situation that led to the probability of recession. So normally we wouldn't see such dramatic changes in the probability of recession, but we're in an unusual time right now. But it's good news so far as in terms of prospects for the future and a recovery of a lot of the US equity losses we've had since the beginning of the year.
One comment, you may want to, just for the newer members, flip to page 46. These are just some important metrics on the profile of the funds. I guess maybe comment on the fund status for the pension, fund status for OPEB, and then the expected return assumption, because we do talk about that as a board.
Sure. Yeah. And one of the things we do when we go through this type of analysis is collect the latest information from the plan actuary. I started my career as a pension actuary, so they speak my language when they provide those numbers. The pension plan right now at a funded status at 110%. That's as of the last the valuation that we had at the time that we did this analysis. That number is based on liabilities that use the expected return on assets. Basically, the actuary sets a series of future benefit payments, and then they discount those back with your expected return on plan assets. So it's 6.625 right now. Every year, the actuary is required to go through an exercise to make sure that's a reasonable estimate. So my hope and expectation with the changes in the portfolio, that it would be even easier to justify that number. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that they increase that number. That impacts everything. But that number is particularly important and much more important for a government type plan than it would be for like a corporate defined benefit plan.
And when's the next review done or due? This is
the valuations are done as of July 1st, but they typically take a good 8-9 months to
so end of the year we would maybe have a
they would have they go through an exercise of getting updated participant data as of July 1st, and then they go through that exercise. I haven't seen the latest version of the valuation report, but there's probably one that's close to being available, given that the valuation date is July
23. So it's old.
Oh, this one is as of July. Yeah, that was the
2
latest
years
one.
old, so I would think we'd have some. Yeah. Okay.
One that's more recent.
Okay. But the 6.6 is 625 is still a good assumption.
Yeah, in our opinion, based on our capital market assumptions, that return would still be justified.
Well, but given that you're changing the portfolio, right, isn't the expected return going to be like 7.3?
Well, there's the numbers that come out of the system, and then there's the number that's used because that number used for valuation purposes tends to be fairly stable year to year. They want it to stay fairly stable because if you change it, it immediately changes your funded status because of the way they discount.
So you're not going to recommend changing this return on asset, even though our portfolio mix is.
We try to keep it on the conservative side for obvious reasons, just to make sure we're.
Yeah, because for example, if you increased it to 7%, your funded status would jump up to, I don't know, 120 or something %, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're in a better spot. It's the same benefit payments. It's just the way that they're discounted. So being more conservative in that area is probably prudent.
That's what we've done in the past. Okay.
But as rates, I mean, you think back to 2023, July, 10-year was probably, I don't know, 3% on rates. Were starting to move up, but they hadn't really. And now we're 4.5%. And we're actually getting to a point where
that's a good point.
Our number is really looking conservative because on 35% of our portfolio, we're earning
a valid point.
A heck of a big chunk. So if we wanted to save some, I don't know, what is our current required payment?
Well, last year was only $500,000. And what is our payment? It was nothing.
Because of how well funded you are, you have a pretty small, for the pension, a pretty small required.
Right. But if we were woefully underfunded, it would be an opportunity to.
Right.
And wasn't it around 800? It's, I think it's around 800. The ADAC is what?
That's what it says.
I think we look at it next year. I do. That's a really good point.
For the OPEB, it would help as well.
Yeah, and what we
That OPEB
saw,
numbers.
We're getting close to 100.
I think that OPEB number could be the elite number. Is anybody over 89%? Well, I don't know. These things are a little dated, but 89 is
Okay.
really high for OPEB, I think.
looking at, and the actuary, well, sometimes
I
we'll
think so.
provide numbers for the actuary to kind of, to view, but they're the ones who sign the dotted line in terms of agreeing to the expected return on assets. In 2022, rates went up significantly, as we all know. I mean, at least 250 basis points was the increase in corporate bond rates. And for some groups that immediately changed the capital market forecast that companies like ours used, fixed income had higher expected returns. And so it was easier to justify an increase in expected returns. So it's worth having the discussion. As I mentioned before, it's unusual for cities and counties to change that assumption, especially up, but it's not unheard of. It's something that could potentially be justified.
Yeah, it was 380 back in July, so 23, so it's not up as much.
Yeah, and the big change was during 2022, but there's been an increase in rates since then as well. And it's also just something that the actuary likes to keep it steady, but it's obviously something they can look at and see if it's possible to increase.
Since I've been on this board, I think we've lowered it twice, right? I think we've taken that down a couple of clicks over the last 8 or 9 years, just to be a little more conservative, make sure we had the coverage.
We were at 75 at one point, now we're at 625.
Which was pretty common. Early in my career, 7.58 was pretty common. As rates went down, it was harder to justify. Now that rates have gone up, there's been a slower adoption of higher rates in comparison to how much they went down over time.
I think we'll take a look at it in this budget cycle for next year to see, and it would potentially impact the OPEB and pension payment. Yep. Okay. Anyway, okay. Anything else? Any other questions? So we have a motion to make. You've approved this.
Yes, we have approved moving
Effective
from
55,
the current.
56.
We passed 3 resolutions. One was to maintain the 65-35 equity fixed income mix across all portfolios. The next thing we voted on was to adopt a scenario D. So that's 30% to US large cap passive, 3% to US small cap equity, 10% to non-US developed markets, 2% emerging markets, 12% global equity, 4% public real estate REITs essentially, and 4% to infrastructure. 35% stays in fixed income.
Was there a third?
No,
Those are the 2.
oh, no, and then we voted to make that allocation applicable to the pension fund and OPEB.
Okay, so I need a motion to approve those modifications to the investment
I'll
portfolio.
move it because I'm bringing it to them.
Okay, second, fair enough.
Second.
Okay, Maria, all in favor? Any opposed? None, so moved. Just make you sit there for a new lesson in stop loss.
Fascinating hearing
Stop
another
loss
actuary
insurance.
go on for an
We owe
hour.
you
It's like,
one.
Is this what it feels like to listen to an expert?
Tucker, they go first no matter what next time. Thank you
Okay.
both so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Okay, housekeeping.
No, yeah, well, no, we're here for,
Oh, no, we have
we have a
another
police.
strategic review.
housekeeper. We have the police building department.
You are
Yes,
next.
you are up. Joe and Bill. This isn't,
wake up.
this isn't the gridiron.
Like stop loss carry forward discussions to remember, boy, I miss those town council days. Yeah, it's
Too.
but you know what really amazed me? He was so excited talking about.
Oh,
that
he's
stuff.
good.
You know,
He's-
hats
he's-
off to those insurance
he's,
dudes.
he's,
Man alive.
he found one and he's really good at it.
Yeah.
We're lucky to have him.
I mean, these conversations have been going on for a long time. You know, people tuning in for the first time and saying, what are they talking about? You know, right? I mean, these decisions have been made. So Thank you guys for doing all that. Well, the news continues to be good. And Nick, we took a tour last week. It looks great, but not too great. You don't want people to think that we
The appropriate amount of greatness.
exactly, it's appropriate greatness.
Appropriate greatness. I gotta write that down. That,
In all seriousness, people, when you go through it, you have to understand that when this town decided to reuse the 100-year-old school building, that things in that original building are going to be not necessarily right-sized as if you started with a blank piece of paper because of where the support walls are. These were wide hallways. This was a school. So you'll go through and you say, well, geez, that office looks big. And you know what? It is big. There's a few big offices here and there because that's the way the walls are. And I think that's the technical building term. But the important stuff, the stuff in the new building in the back where the safety elements are, we were able to build that from a fresh piece of paper, and that is all appropriately sized, right? The 2 sally ports, prisoner processing, the cells, the things that where people could get hurt if we didn't have the best practice stuff in there. So that's all pretty good. So I assume you guys saw the pictures. It's good. We want to thank the Beautification League, for helping out. They'll be doing their plannings very shortly. And again, safety record is still perfect. And the neighbors, exactly. I know. We almost lost it the other day. We're taking the tour last week, and the #1 guy from Turner involved, he almost tripped on a wire. And I said, if you trip and break your wrist, I'm dragging you next door because you're not going to ruin our safety record with your clumsiness. But the neighbors continue to be very supportive and have been very, very patient. So I'm sure they're as anxious for the police to move in as frankly as the police are. And you see the 2 new important dates, right? From a town perspective, right? The tours, and I believe we asked people to sign up for those. And then, of course, the ribbon cutting ceremony, where we will not be talking about insurance stop loss. We hope. As far as what you guys truly care about, right, is the money.
look, is everyone gonna be able to make it? It's June 4th, right? 10 a.m.
10 a.m.
So.
Yeah.
You better be there.
Be there.
All right.
And thank the 2 building committee members here, Michael and Nick.
Yeah, I'll be there
Very,
for sure.
very good, asking the right questions. From a town investment perspective, 30 million-ish is one of the biggest things, if not, right? They're not, not the biggest, but certain maybe non-school that we've done. And we've been very fortunate to have a guy like Joe here, professional project manager, really Joe, in all sincerity, keeping an eye and making sure things are going in the right direction and that the decisions that needed to be made by the community were made, in an appropriate matter. So, well done. Do you want to talk about this stuff or?
I mean, you summed it all up. So I'll just go through a couple of the milestones. On May 27th, there'll be a public open house. So go to the PD website for any sort of details. It looks like it's going to be 12 to 3, but the public needs to sign up using
Sign Up Genius.
Sign Up Genius. Yes, exactly. And then on the May 28th, we start the police department move. So we start physically moving people out of 39 Locust.
Yeah.
June 3rd, we move the dispatch. So they'll be conducting business. There'll be one day where dispatch will be done remotely. But they'll be doing business out of the police station June 3rd at the end of the day. And June 4th, the police will be operating out of 174 South Avenue. So they'll get the word out that they're moved. We didn't really find that there were a lot of people had problems finding the police department when we moved to 39 Locust, so I'm sure we won't have any problems. They did a really good.
It's a different traffic pattern, right? You're coming in from the south side of the building instead of the north side.
Yep. And as you mentioned, the ribbon cutting ceremony on the 4th at 10 o'clock.
We are how far ahead of the original plan?
Thanksgiving.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're 6 months ahead. We're 6 months ahead of schedule.
Hold on.
And we've been working on this project since we started on, what was it? August of 2022 with this particular design. And before
But
that,
there was 2 years.
and before that,
Passion around
Stuart
designs, yes.
Salvini worked on basically every single site in New Canaan for a possible, use for.
We
for
remember
a
that.
station. Yeah, important work though, because
Yes.
it did.
Well, it alleviated any
Doubt.
or second guessing about the decision that was made.
Yeah.
Affected the cost. It might have affected the cost.
You know, the delay could have,
You did save a 99-year-old building. That's it's been on South Avenue, as a school since people were driving, Model Ts to that. So and you got 99 years out of it, and it was built to last another 50 years. So really nice presence. So as far as the contingency.
Should reflect that. It really should. The minutes should reflect that. Not a minute. Stickler, but appropriate great.
Joe Spurgeon said right now, those police building guys, they love what they do. They're
So as far as the contingency goes, as of the last update from Turner, we were at $800,000 for contingency. Turner also has $250,000 worth of contingency. We're closing out contracts with them now, so we anticipate that there'll be another $250,000 that will close out of Turner's contract. So it'll bring the overall contingency just over $1 million. Again, knock on wood, we still have to close out all the contracts, but we're at that $1 million.
$1 million-ish.
Congratulations. That's great. Just so you know, we can't bank that, right? And that has to go to capital account, which we could use for taxpayer supported capital, I guess, if we wanted to. Or bonded bond, but just reduces the bounding we're going to put out to market. Yep. Okay. Yep. Good. Great.
We're in a happy place right now.
Yep. Yeah. And all the details are there on the Turner report. We meet twice a month, and obviously everyone's invited to stop in the meeting if they want any additional descriptions, or I can send it over to you via email.
It's a short conversation when you're ahead of
Ahead of
schedule.
schedule and under budget. Yeah.
Those are short
Exactly.
conversations.
Exactly. Any questions?
No, these guys have done a great.
No, a tremendous job.
They
Yep.
seem to be enthusiastic about their work.
Exactly. All right. Well, thank you both. I'll see you on the 4th. I won't be able to make the 27th, but I'll definitely be there on the 4th. Look forward to it. Thank you very much.
All
Great
right,
job,
thank
Joe.
you.
I think I have one before that if you want.
Okay. Home stretch. Team. Well, this was my favorite part of the meeting till you sort of ruined it for me. I don't know about ruined it, but I had 5 million revenue surplus banked until you took some of it away.
Back, we'll get it back.
Let's do it. State of the general fund. Overall year-to-date revenue as of April, end of April, 175.5 million, which is 103.3% of the budgeted expectations. Current tax collections are 101.2% of, again, budgeted expectation totaling 159.9 million. Prior year collections are 1.4 million, which is huge, 901% of the budgeted amount due to tax lien avoidance and two properties that were auctioned.
Why is it 1.4, not 2.1? I thought it was a $2.1 million.
Split between prior taxes and prior interest.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
Okay,
it-
so
you'll-
it's 2.1, but the interest is down in interest.
It's another,
Check.
yeah.
Good catch.
Next up, building permit revenues, 1.2 million, which is 136% of the 850,000 budget that we had expected. Ahead of 219,000 ahead of last year. Again, as with the last couple of months, this increase is driven by Burgess and Shire development and new residential construction. Conveyance fees have reached 1.7 million, which is 112.7% of the budget, 431,000 above last year. Again, I think I remember this from last month as well, mainly due to a large fee associated with the Riverwood transaction. Parking revenues, 936,000, which is 106%, 106.8% of the budget, 177,000 out of last year. Interest on investments is at 1.8 million, which is 89.5% of the budget.
So the interest portion of the back taxes are in this number?
This is
Nope, you're down
pure
below.
investment
I
income.
think in other, right? Or,
The tax interest is another. This is pure investment income.
All right, so this is Andrew's line.
this is Andrew's line. Well, I assume we're expecting to hit the 2.
Yes. I haven't drawn down anything yet on the extra 20 we have out there.
All right, good.
Trying to hold off.
Tipping fees, 281,000, which is 67.8% of the budget. Down a little bit from last year, down 5.2% compared to April of last year. And the expense bottom line, 137.3 million, which is at about 78.5% of the budget for the year.
Okay, before you jumped a couple things here. So just BOE excess cost. We expect to get that.
Oh, on these ones, the BOE excess cost, I didn't put that one in there because we are probably gonna get about another 207,000 out of
Okay.
this,
Okay.
to cover that. Your favorite line, which is other revenues.
I don't know if that's it's my favorite this year for
Was.
sure.
So like in there, and this will be coming in front of you next month. If you remember last month, I had asked for a transfer of 194 out of this fund and put it over to special projects. We took $1 million of ARPA funds that are not going to be expended to be as reimbursement for revenue lost in the general fund. But then we're choosing to reassign that to 4 different projects. So you're going to have another request at the next meeting of approximately 800,000. So I'm taking that $1 million back to put into special projects.
They were just projects that couldn't get done in the time that was allocated before the state was gonna require us to.
Those projects.
So the 5.5 goes to 4.5 in terms of variance, positive variance on revenues. Now that's through April. We have 2 months of revenue coming.
I definitely think you're going to hit your 5
We'll
million.
get over 5. I would
Yes.
say you can get 200 from the excess cost grant you just told me, and then I think we'll get another 200 in interest. Yes. So there's 400.
Yep.
That gets you close enough to
Conveyance
5.
fees, usually May and June is when conveyance fees kicked up.
Yeah,
higher.
there you go. Okay. Okay.
And there's a couple other things.
So now, how much are we gonna have on the expense side?
This side from the, our kind of fixed costs with salaries, they're gonna come in within budget, because we have, as you know, when we have the storms, we don't budget for the storms. So any savings from open positions and things like that will cover storm expenses outside of the ones that were covered from, was it August? Where we will be getting about 80,000 back on that. There's nothing, the only thing that really from our expenditure side is we're looking at the departments to really look at, we've only 2 months, a month and a half left for the year. What are you going to spend and unencumber those funds that you don't believe you're going to spend?
Yeah.
Then I know that's true
Yeah,
savings.
yeah,
So that's
okay.
what we're trying to do right now.
Okay.
So in June, I should have a better understanding, hopefully on the expenditure.
The reason to pin this down, of course, is we've committed 5 million to pay down the mill rate
Mhm.
in our budget. And we just have it right there.
Yeah.
There it is. That assumes no benefit on expense. So so, right, is that right?
Yep,
Okay.
Yep, you've
So
covered it.
so I think we've heard we need to keep augmenting our, unassigned general fund a little bit more per Moody's. This may be an opportunity to do both, pay the 5 million and add a little bit to the fund. So that's obviously not for tonight, but we'll discuss that in June, but it feels like that's starting to come together. Right? Yeah, good. Without Josh. So it's good.
His name is Ryan. His name is Ryan.
All right. What else do you have for us?
Reviews, we could review the transfers. Any questions? Couple pages there.
One for approval, the rest are reviews.
Okay. I'll step through them. You got
There's only one to approve.
one to approve. Any question? Well, let's just ask. Any questions on the ones to review? Pretty straightforward, Ann. Ins and outs. Any questions, team, on any of these 30 items?
Looks like a lot of cleanup.
Looks like a lot of cleanup. Okay.
We're trying to get all the lines in sync from where they're getting charged. And the departments are being very good about it.
Okay.
Good.
You want to explain the one to approve?
The one to approve is the group insurance for retirees is coming in slightly. We have some that are up to 65 are on our plan, and the 65 and over are on a set plan. So the ones between up to 65, we just have higher benefits or claims coming in for it. So we have a savings in our HSA contribution. That's an estimate every year of what people are going to, what we put in to their account. So we need to transfer in to cover the insurance.
Okay. Any questions? Anyone? On that? No? Okay. Motion to approve? Motion, Maria, second. Michael?
Aye.
Opposed? None. So moved.
Thank you.
Anything else? Do you have anything else? So next week, yeah. Next week is next week. Next month, we have a public hearing for WPCA on this.
Clock start again for WPCA.
Okay, Nick, 6 o'clock for that.
Oh, yeah, there's-
If you can make it, you can make it. If you can't, you can't. Don't worry about that. 7 is when the meeting will start. So we won't start the public hearing.
Finance will be at 7, WPCA will be at 6.
Yeah, okay. And at the June meeting, we will,
Right?
the only item we're going to go covers, well, voting on approving the budget and voting on that. And I guess we've already voted on that. It's just a mill rate. Yeah,
Mill rate,
yeah,
yeah.
everything's done. So
June 10th?
Well, you can always relook the general fund contribution.
I think we will want the financials,
As part of
obviously,
the
through
mill rate
May.
conversation.
You'll have the best info you have for us, obviously.
But I believe a forecast out to June.
Just let the fund will be what it is, whatever the surplus will be. You won't know the surplus really until August, July, August.
Yeah.
But we'll have a good beat. The revenues will know.
Right, but in past years, we've gotten a chart of possible mill rates. And we've. Yeah.
You can see what the changes are. We'll have that
Very
too.
last number
That's right.
to use,
That's
right?
it. That's exactly.
Okay,
We'll do the
so-
same thing.
So we need to do that. Right?
Oh, we have the cash management update. We postponed that for tonight because it was going to be too much.
Yeah.
So he's coming in, Andrew? Yeah, good. Okay. Okay. All right. There's nothing else. Motion to adjourn. Robert, second. Nick, all in favor? All right. Opposed, none. So moved. Alan, thank you.
58.